Howdy, folks. Steve Sweeney here with Headwaters for Heroes. Thank you for joining us for another session of Conversations with Heroes. This session is brought to you by Bell's Hollow Ranch. Mr. Greg Tatum, longtime supporter of Headwaters for Heroes, and really ties in great with our guest this time, Gunnery Sergeant Guillermo T.J. Tejeda. Did I do that right?
Yes, sir, you did.
That wasn't a very convincing yes, sir.
No, it's good.
That's good. Well, we're going to refer to you as TJ from here on out.
Sounds good.
TJ, we've known you for quite a while, and I really was looking forward to this session because you've been through a lot serving our great nation. You've suffered a lot, but by God, you set one hell of a great example. And so I'm looking forward to this. So we're going to kick it off and we're going to get rolling. So TJ, where are you from? Tell the world where you're from.
I grew up in Los Angeles, and I got to Los Angeles when I was around, 4 or 5 years old, something like that. I haven't nailed down the date yet. I've been asking around for quite some time. But no, we immigrated from El Salvador during the war. As we all know, that was in the late 70s, early 80s. That was probably one of the worst places in the world. And, my family was forced to get out of there. It was just, it was life or death. It was life or death, and we were forced to get out of there. We were brought to Los Angeles. That's where I grew up.
Los Angeles is an interesting place. I've been there one time. Went out there for a convention, and I've never gone back.
Well, interesting is one way of putting it.
So your life growing up there, I mean, we hear about gangs and all of that stuff. I mean, what was life for you growing up there?
Well, a lot of people, when they that are from Southern California, you ask them where they're from, and a lot of people say L.A. And the next question is like, well, yeah, but where in L.A.? And where I grew up at is L.A., L.A. So, I mean, some people say L.A. and they're from Riverside County.
Right.
That's not L.A. Nothing to be proud of, but it is what it is. Where we grew up at, where it was probably some of the nastiest places of L.A. now. And it was just gang infested, crime riddled area, where it took a lot to stay away from that lifestyle. You go through a lot. I mean, all the stereotypical stuff that you see in, we'll say, a gang movie in LA. Yeah, some of it was pretty accurate. The movie Boys in the Hood, stuff like that. Yeah, it's drive-bys almost on a at least a weekly basis, if not a daily basis.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's just so when I joined the Marine Corps, I was used to hearing the gunshots and all that. Just joined the Marine Corps, we did miss kind of hearing the ghetto bird up top, putting you to sleep at night, but. No, on the serious note though, it was the area where we grew up. It was not all that nice back then. When I was a teenager, my parents moved us out of LA, the downtown LA area, and we went up to the San Fernando Valley. It was a little bit different for a little bit before all the crime stuff kind of expanded.
Right.
And, next thing you know, we're almost in the same situation again, so it's not as bad, but it was San Fernando area, North Hollywood, there's some areas out there that are areas that you don't want to get caught once that sun goes down. So that was childhood. It was you just had to learn how to adapt, learn how to get through it, learn how to, dodge bullets and dodge that way of life, which thank God for my parents, that I knew that if I started veering off in the wrong direction, it was they'll be hell to pay. So it kind of kept me in line a little bit.
Well, we see that in a lot of our veterans. They refer back to their family, the way they grew up, and their parents kept them on the straight and narrow. So that's awesome that you've had that. So when did you and what possessed you to join the Marines?
You know, after doing a lot of interviews, a lot of talking to a lot of people, that question always comes up. And and a lot of times I find myself, kind of trying to, trying to be ready for the next time that question comes about. And it always boils down to I just always wanted to serve. And when I initially joined, it was I want to go out there, I want to do something. Initially, it was law enforcement. I wanted to go into the law enforcement arena. But once you graduate from high school, you're still not of age to go into any law enforcement agencies. So I had to really think about what was I going to do meanwhile, and just thinking about it, was like, man, what better way to give to a nation that took us in, when we were at our worst, when we were, fleeing, from, probably potentially near death situations. What better way of serving than, doing something great, joining the military. And initially it was, I want to join the military. I have to do something before I become a police officer. But I'm going to serve. And growing up, I really didn't know the difference between the branches of service. You got all the branches of service. So just like many other young boys, you're like, yeah, the Army. I want to go be a soldier. And then you grow up a little bit more. You learn, what the differences are. And of course, you get to high school and you have that recruiters. You have those recruiters that, every single one of them is going to come out there and tell you that they're the better branch service. Right. That you should join them because of whatever reason. And so I had a few conversations with all the different recruiters, and but the Marine Corps always stood out. And when I was a teenager, I was in the LAPD Explorer program, and it happened to be that a lot of the explorers, as they were, becoming of age, of leaving the program, graduating high school, and going off to doing bigger, better things, a lot of them ended up joining the Marine Corps. And of course, we see them come back, and they got that badass dress blue uniform.
Yeah.
And as a young boy, young 15, 16-year-old, 17-year-old boy, I mean, you look at these guys that, for one, they're older than you, so you've looked up to them because they've been teaching you leadership stuff, in the LAPD Explorer program. They've been around you, and just to put the cherry on top, you see them come back in that badass uniform. Oh, man, it was like, hands down, I'm like, that right there, that's what I want one day. And it all kind of fell into place. I wanted to serve. I wanted to go into law enforcement. I wasn't ready for that yet. And I finally figured out that where I wanted to serve. And I once the time, time was there to make a decision, I decided to go to the Marine Corps. And hands down, the best decision I've ever made in my life.
What year was that?
So I went to boot camp in 1999. I joined the Marine Corps my senior year of high school, and I ended up turning 19 in boot camp in 1999.
So you were already in Marines before 9/11.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's interesting because some of the people we've been talking with on this, had a lot to do with 9/11. So you were there before 9/11.
Yes. So a lot of the guys that I served with, that you ask them why they joined, and it's amazing. It's awesome. When you hear them, say that, that 9/11 was the reason why they joined. I mean, I've served with guys that they said that 9/11 on 9/11, that day after it happened, they were at the recruiter's office, signing up, and you know, getting ready to, pick up arms for their country.
Yeah, but your patriotism, I mean, like I said, it was before 9/11, but you were showing your appreciation to a country, which this is a different story for us. And quite honestly, this is what I like about these sessions. I did not know that story about you, and we've known each other quite a few years. So coming from El Salvador, living through the hood, so to speak, and you were ready to serve your country, even if it was in law enforcement, that's still serving. And, I appreciate the fact that means a lot to hear that, we see the immigration situation right now is horrible. I mean, they're coming across the border, thousands and thousands and thousands.
Yeah.
And then you saw where those I don't remember where they were from, Venezuela, I guess, those guys that jumped on the New York police.
Yep.
And, now they're getting them back, and I hope to God they're going to deport them. But, it's a different, you talk about, and maybe, and we don't have to get into it, but I think, you talked about leaving El Salvador as a life or death situation, and your parents recognized that. And obviously there was a means for y'all to get here. And so you're showing your respect, and that says a lot for your character. So you're going to be one of the older guys that we're talking to here. You were in this thing for a number of years. So
yes, sir, I was.
So, and I know you got married somewhere in there.
Oh yeah, that's right. I did.
You forgot.
Yes.
So how long were you in the Marines before you got married?
Oh, it keeps on getting better. That's all story in itself as well.
Oh, did I open up something I don't want to?
All right. So, things happen in the hood,
Yeah.
Things happen.
Yeah.
Now, when I was 17, when I was 15, I met my wife.
Mm-hmm.
We met in high school, and one thing led to another. And,
Imagine that.
And somehow,
that's that charisma you have.
Well, she was hitting on me, so I mean.
Well, you can't,
Oh man, we met. Yes, so we met in high school, and come senior year, we had our daughter. We had our first daughter. So it was.
So you actually have a family before you joined the Marines.
Well, it's like I said, it's a story.
Well, we don't have to go into all that.
It's a story. No, there's a lot of things where I could, a lot of reasons why I'm grateful for the Marine Corps, and when I was a complete jackass, at times in my life, especially as a teenager. And my head was way up my ass at times, and so I my now wife, at that time girlfriend, so she got pregnant. We one thing led to another, and we were teen parents.
Mm-hmm.
Our senior year, we had our daughter. We were teen parents, and I still wasn't making all that much of a great decisions in life. I didn't quite take responsibility of things, right off the bat. It just for whatever reason, I just
let's chalk it up a lack of maturity.
I did. Yes. So a lack of maturity. I didn't step up to the plate right away. So we were teen parents and still, boyfriend and girlfriend, and me being a jackass, really didn't make didn't quite follow through with the way that I should have. So being 17, I'm like, oh shoot, okay, I at least got to get a job. So I got a job, in Burger King, and so when my daughter was born, that's how I, at that time it was child support, because we weren't married, so
Mm-hmm.
it was child support. That's where child support came from.
Right.
And but I had already made this decision that I was going to join the Marine Corps, and I got my ass chewed, so many times by my recruiter, for not, stepping up to the plate, and he knew, that I was, running around the city, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, some stuff that, had I, been in the wrong place at the wrong time, just making some decisions, it would have prevented me from ever becoming a Marine. So, the job of a recruiter is not just to, pick you up, put you in, sign a contract and send you off to boot camp. There's a lot more to it than that. But so he knew my situation. He knew that my wife she knew from when she was pregnant to when my daughter was born, and I have been talking to the same recruiter for, quite some time. And when it was time to ship out, near, ship out time, he's like, so you guys getting married, And my dumb ass, I'm like, hell no, I said something like that. I don't remember exactly what I said, but, trust me, I still hear it till this day because my wife, was there, and, it was, so don't bring up that subject if you're ever around her. But yeah, so I mean, we were teen parents. That was one of those things that we had we had to tackle that at that time. And with kind of ass chewings that my recruiter gave me, those helped out a little bit, but he kept me making just enough right decisions to where I was able to make it to boot camp, make it out of boot camp, and I think that's where things really. Kind of the Marine Corps, took my head out of my ass, a little bit,
Yeah.
and make me grow up, gave me that little bit more of that maturity that I needed. When we came back, things were, when I came back from boot camp, things, they weren't all, rainbows and unicorns with, me and my, wife or girlfriend at that time. But it was good enough to where I was making a little bit better decisions, and because I wasn't a complete jackass anymore, I was just a little bit of a jackass. I was able to keep her around. She was able to keep me. I don't know how it goes, but I did it well enough for her to want to stay with me. And graduated boot camp June 22nd, 1999. We got married, that following year on May 27th.
So how many years y'all been married now?
Well, I mean, let's see.
Yeah.
It was so we got married in 2000. So
Okay.
24 years married, but we've been together since we were 15.
And then we're going to talk about the marriage, and because that's one of the things that in getting to know you and know your family, that's one of the real impressive things with your life, because we don't see this all the time, is that longevity. Y'all married 24 years now, and we see the divorce rate, especially with soldiers like yourself that come back injured, or even come back from fighting. The divorce rate's very, very high, and so it plays into the character, and we're going to talk about that. But let's continue with boot camp. And so now you're married, and where do they send you?
So initially, right after boot camp, interesting enough, I go about an hour away from home. So I grew up in L.A. and the Marine Corps. Our two major bases are, the East Coast and West Coast. East Coast being Camp Lejeune,
Right.
West Coast being Camp Pendleton. So the Marine Corps stationed me like an hour and a half away, Camp Pendleton. I did my first enlistment in Pendleton. Which at times it worked out well, for me and my wife, it worked out well. But join the Marine Corps to go do, crazy stuff, and I end up, just down the road.
Yeah.
The first contract, basically, first, that I was in the first 4 years, being just down the road, it actually gave us the choice of my wife either coming, being on base or being closer to base, and actually us being there, just in Pendleton, or being an hour and a half away. She could, still, I could kind of commute, and she could keep her job up there, which is the option that we took. Joining the Marine Corps at that time, I mean, shoot, I think our paycheck was like $600 a month. After taxes, it was like about we'll say $700. I had a dependent, so I get a little bit more money. So it was about $700 a month. She was, probably making, double that. She took a short career in accounting at that time. So she was making the money, I wasn't. So she's like, nope. She's like, I'm keeping this job. I'm like, okay, it makes sense, And I'll just come home on the weekends for sure. And then sometimes if whenever we're off early enough in the afternoons, I would go home, and that's what we were doing at the beginning. When we ended up getting married in May of 2000, that's when we got our own place, got our own apartment, and still in the hood, but we made it work, and that's what we did for the first contract. I mean, I was always training. Then there was a couple deployments there, so her being out there, making significantly more money than me, it worked out for us. It wasn't easy, but it worked.
Well, I'm sure it had logistically, it had its troubles and raising a family and whatnot. But outside of that, I guess they didn't deploy you anywhere. You were pretty much just there in Pendleton, or
no? So I deployed to Okinawa. That was my first deployment. My first deployment was to Okinawa, and being in the Marine Corps, whenever you're in the infantry, you deployed. We have a base in Okinawa, but it's not an infantry base. Infantry Marines deployed to Okinawa, but we're not stationed there. And from there, we more than likely we're just gonna be there for just a little bit, sometimes weeks, maybe a month, do some training there, and we jump on ship. We jump on ship with the Navy, and then our Uber drivers take us around. If you're a West Coast Marine like myself, deploying to Okinawa, man, going out there, jumping on ship, and that's when being in the Marine Corps, being a force of readiness, we're securing that area of the world. We jump on ship, and anything that pops up, in the Pacific area, or that theater out there, we're ready for whatever it is. So that was when we're in non-combat status. We'll say Marines deploy out there, and we're just ready. For whenever the balloon goes up, we're ready for the call, and that's what we did in 2002. 2002, we deployed out there, jumped on ship with the Navy, and hit up a bunch of ports in Southeast Asia, trained with different Marines from different countries, but essentially we're just there waiting for something, if something were to happen.
That's pretty cool. So, and I asked some of these questions because, my dad served 23 years in the Army, and he was in Korea and Vietnam. And I remember specifically Vietnam. It was very tough because at that time my dad had 5 kids, and he's in Vietnam, and communicating and I admire your wife because she's taking care of the family while you're away serving. And that's something that a lot of people don't quite understand is when you're serving, the whole family is in essence serving, and people overlook that because it's always the mother that is, for lack of better words, left behind. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but when you signed on to do what you were going to do in the Marines, it's a little difficult. The wives sign on, and it's a tough deal because, yeah, you were there, commuting, so to speak, been home on weekends. Now you're deployed, and she's having to do it all by herself. I mean, you still got the paycheck, but, that little bit of you being home, I shouldn't say it that way, but that you being home, it makes it more difficult on the families. And I admire the wives of our service men, and even the husbands, because there are those cases where women are serving and they have a husband that stays home. But how did you communicate? I mean, you were on ship. I remember how Dad communicated with us from Vietnam, but when you're on ship, how did you communicate with your family? How did you stay in touch?
Well, for my first deployment in '02, when we did the first Okinawa deployment, I mean, communication really was it was extremely hard. It wasn't quite there. Technology wasn't what it is now.
Right.
So we were just talking about that with some friends, and about that deployment, about being on ship. Being on ship, you pretty much have no communication with whoever's back here, whether it be your spouse, your wife, your parents, whatever it is, girlfriend, boyfriend. At that time in '02, there really wasn't much communication, except there was one payphone on ship. There was one payphone on ship, and it wasn't cheap. It was not cheap, and of course,
a payphone on the ship.
Oh man, it's yeah.
Wow,
it was. I can't remember if it was either 50 cents a minute or $1 a minute. I'm leaning more towards saying that it was $1 a minute, because we hadn't talked in
Well, knowing our government, it was probably $1 or more.
I hadn't called home in a while. We had been on ship, I want to say, like 45 days, or something like that. And but being a Lance Corporal, you don't make that much money. So right. You're like, man, spending $1 a minute. I'm like, geez. But so we get on the phone, and I'm assuming it was probably late at night, because there was nobody waiting for the phone. I want to say that we had about a $100 bill on that one phone call, and we're on the phone, we're talking, and next thing you know, we look at the time, and it's about $100 later. That I do know. So I don't remember how long we talked, but I know it was about $100, and I had an AT&T credit card. So they actually, back then, from what I remember, you could use this your credit card as a calling card. Remember back in the days when they had that calling card?
Yeah.
You got to go buy a calling card to make long distance calls. Well, it was integrated with my credit card. So in my infinite wisdom, I decided to use that day to call home. And it was, I mean, now you just laugh about it, but I mean, it's one of those things that you could. Now we could tell our kids that story, and they're going to look at us like we got a unicorn growing out of our head. You're like, what are you talking about? A calling card, calling from ship, one payphone? Yeah.
I've never heard that. That's funny. But it has come a long ways. Like I told you, communicating with my dad while he was in Vietnam was a challenge.
Other than that, it was just snail mail. You ride home, you have when we travel out there, is you got a few ships, So for us, the fleet was made out of four ships, and you have a helicopter delivering mail, delivering bags of mail on almost like on a daily basis. I don't think it was a daily basis. It might have been, whatever. But yeah, snail mail. That's what was communication back then.
Well, it'd have to be tough being on a ship somewhere. I mean, it's not like that you got. I mean, obviously on a troop ship, I guess you'd call it. How do you get out there in the middle of the ocean. How do you get mail? How do you send mail? And I've never understood that, but it's like, it's got to be tough being away from the family like that.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if I should say we're fortunate enough to see, how it really was back in the days. Sound like a dinosaur here, talking about, how things were prior to the digital age. I mean, now is just everything's just so, instantaneously, that it just, send a text message or whatever, an email.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in '02 there was emails were around, but, for us, the man on the, low end of the totem pole,
Right.
emails wasn't gonna, a lance corporal was not gonna get emails.
Right. Right.
So for us, it was snail mail. But I mean, if there was an emergency back home, I mean, we always had the Red Cross messages for the most serious stuff. Your family, they get briefed before we go on deployment. Something where, something catastrophic were to happen at home, whether it be an accident or death or something, like that. They get a hold of the Red Cross, and Red Cross gets us a message, pretty much almost immediately. But other than that, if it's not an emergency, if it's just hey, somebody had a baby, you're probably gonna get news about that baby when that baby's some weeks or months old.
Right. Right. Well, then you talk about your first contract. So you re-enlisted.
Yes, sir.
So when was your first contract up?
Okay, so I went in boot camp in 1999. So my first contract was up in '03. In '03, that's when so I just not in the Marine Corps. Not everybody deployed to combat immediately after 9/11. My unit was already designated to deploy to Okinawa. The rotation was already set, basically.
Right.
And things didn't really get the amount of troops that we put in Afghanistan right after 9/11. It didn't just happen as sending everybody out there all at once. My unit already had a basically was in the rotation for an Okinawa deployment, and we thought that it was going to get modified. A lot. I mean, anybody that joins the Marine Corps, especially in the infantry, more than likely, combat. You hear combat, something's going on, you're going to want to be there.
Right.
So all of us were like, yeah, shoot, it sucks that we're in this situation, but we're going to combat, and no, our orders didn't change for our unit. We stayed in the rotation to deploy to Okinawa. So we didn't deploy to combat right away. And after coming back from my 7 months of being on the Okinawa deployment in '02, I was what we call a short termer. I was getting ready to get out of the Marine Corps. So I almost got out of the Marine Corps without seeing any combat. But as we all remember, in late 2002, early 2003, late 2002, that's when things kind of started, ramping up in Iraq, with Saddam Hussein, getting crazy, and I mean that's a different rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
But anyhow, for whatever reason it happened. When we got back from deployment, I was set to get out. We got back the summer of 2002. I was my EAS, end of active service. Date was March 15th of 2003. So being coming back from deployment late summer of '02, I had less than a year to my end of that contract, and I thought that was it. I joined the Marine Corps to serve. All the reasons that we talked about earlier. And so next was, law enforcement for me. I'm like, well, shoot, didn't get to go see combat, so it is what it is. And so I started the procedures, the paperwork, and everything to getting out and pursuing LAPD. I pretty much had everything, lined up. My plan was, already, kind of set. We even, started talking with my wife about our next kid. We're like, we really didn't want to do anything when I was still on active duty, my first contract, as far as having a kid. But we're like, okay, I'm about to EAS and start talking about our next kid. And sure enough, after that deployment, she got pregnant. And
well, you say that like you didn't have anything to do with it.
I get home and she's like, guess what? I'm pregnant. I'm like, how'd that happen? How'd that happen? Wait a minute. Yeah. So we were expecting our second kid, and it was December. I was on Christmas leave in December of 2002, and I have all my paperwork ready just to submit for getting out. It's a whole procedure. So the last thing that I had to do is submit my terminal leave paper. Meaning that I was gonna take some of the leave that I had, that I hadn't used on the back end. So getting out of the Marine Corps instead of getting out, March 15th, I would have ended up, getting out, like I want to say I think I had like 45 days on the books, to where I was just gonna, use those 45 days and get out 45 days earlier, still getting paid, all the way up until the 15th, and so. We're on Christmas leave, and I tell my wife, I'm like, oh shoot, I gotta go back to Pendleton. Now, no traffic, an hour easy. In LA traffic, talk about 5 hours, something like that. But so I drive home during the daytime. I was on leave, and I'm like, I gotta go turn in my terminal leave papers. So I pull up to the company office, the parking lot. And as I'm getting out of my car, my company Gunny's he's like, hey, Corporal T, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be on leave. And I'm like, yeah, Gunny. I'm like, I haven't turned in my terminal leave papers. And I'm like, I'm EAS in March, so I need to get this turned in. And he just looks at me. He's like, haven't you heard? He's like, nobody's going anywhere. I'm like, what do you mean, Gunny? And he's like, yeah. He's like, stop loss, stop move just went into effect. He's like, we got orders. We're heading to Iraq. And I'm like, huh, all right, sweet. All right, so get back in my car, drive home. And my wife was, at work that day. So as soon as she got home, I'm like, hey, guess what? We're deploying. And I'm pretty sure the conversation went something like, you're EAS and you're getting out. And that's when I had to break it to her that we were stop loss, stop move. Just, went into effect. Nobody in the military is going anywhere. You stay in the unit that you're in. And you just awaiting, orders, basically. Our orders were to deploy to Iraq. So I want to say that from the minute that they told us, shoot, it was within weeks that we were in Kuwait. Within weeks, maybe no more than a month. So by January, we were in Kuwait.
So with this happening.
End of January, if I'm not mistaken.
With this happening, you could not leave the Marines.
Nope. Everybody got extended. Anybody that was leaving around that time, they got extended till pretty much till further notice.
Wow.
So yeah. So our situation, the shitty part was we're like, well, now she's pregnant,
Yeah.
So now she's pregnant. We thought I was gonna get out and go, and head off to LAPD, to do everything, go to the academy, and but no. All of that changes just at a snap of a finger. And, and that next month we were in Kuwait, getting ready to head into Iraq, which we did on March.
Wow. So were you actually overseas when your initial...
Oh, yeah, you were asking about, the ending my contract, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to re-enlist, so, I I wanted, to go into law enforcement, forever. But joining the Marine Corps, up until, it was almost to like the last minute decision. I still wasn't sure if I wanted to get out of the Marine Corps. I loved it. I loved, I loved being a Marine. So when it came time to deciding on getting out or staying in, I it wasn't a decision that that just came. It was just like it was like a last minute. So when I was submitting all my paperwork, that's why I submitted all my paperwork all late, because I still wasn't sure if I wanted to get out. I was still contemplating re-enlisting, but when stop loss stop move came about, my decision was made. I was going to EAS pretty much in country overseas. So once before we deployed, I talked to my wife. I'm like, okay, I'm still thinking about staying in, and she's like, that's your choice. She's like, I'll support you. Whatever you want to do. She's like, I'll support you. And because we had talked about staying in before that, but I'm like they're gonna want to know when I'm out there, and yeah, I pulled the trigger. When I was out there, I pulled the trigger on re-enlistment. Pulled the trigger many times, but I'm talking about re-enlistment. Yeah. So I talked to the career planner out there, and he's like, "What are you gonna do? What's your plan? Your EAS. Not just me, because it was a bunch of us that were due to get out at that time. So as he was going through the list, he brings you in, talks to you. What are your plans? And I'm like, all right, let's go for it. I can do another 4 years. And I tell everybody that when you join, you can do your first 4 and get out. And shoot, some people get out and you're 21 years old. If you join at 17, you're 21 years old. You're full of life.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you do 8 years, if somebody joins, was it even 18? You get out at 26, you're still full of life. You can still go do whatever else.
Yeah.
Past 8 years, that's when you kind of like, okay, after 8 years, if you're going to stay in the service, whether it be Marine Corps or any other service,
right.
If you're going to stay past 8 years and you make it at 12, by that time you're more than halfway there. Might as well just stay for your full 20. But I was out there, and I'm like, you know what? Let's do another 4, and we'll revisit this at 8. And I re-enlisted out there. I re-enlisted in Kuwait. I was just looking at some pictures at home. I was going through old pictures, and I was just I found the pictures of my re-enlistment. So, yeah, pretty cool. Re-enlisted in Kuwait right before we went into Iraq.
So, what was it like going into Iraq?
Oh man, so Iraq was way different than Afghanistan for me. When I went to Iraq in 2003, it was nothing was established out there. Nothing was established in Iraq as far as forward operating bases. We were an invading force. It's called the Iraq invasion.
Mm-hmm.
We were an invading force. We went in. It was about as conventional as it gets. As far as the last the conflicts, the most recent conflicts that we've been in. We went in and there was nothing there. We had to bring in everything with us, and being that there was no operating bases, no FOBs, what we call it now,
mm-hmm.
no actual bases there. We had to provide our own 360-degree security all the way around. It sucked the first couple of months there. It sucked. You're what we call that at 50% at on guard at all times at the very minimum at 50%. So at night, it's one up, one down. You and your whole mate, it's one of you has to be up at all times. Protecting that 360. Making sure that we have no wire, no walls, no nothing, protecting us. Everything's a danger zone. So it was different. It was different, and we're out there. Yeah, we should have intelligence of providing us reports on where the enemy's at almost at all times.
Right.
So we know where we're going to encounter heavy fighting, and when we're going to be in transit, and more than likely not see anything. But it was, for lack of better words, like it was the Wild West. It was very different from what I experienced at my Afghanistan deployment, we'll say.
The Wild West. So you basically built, wouldn't say you dug in your own base.
Oh, we did. I mean, no, not our own base, but we dug in almost like every night.
So did y'all change locations every day?
It was almost every day. We're moving from Kuwait all the way up. We traveled all the way up to northern Baghdad, and it's everybody's moving. I mean, it's just different units, covering different areas. Army, doing their movements, Marine Corps going this way, and we're moving to the objectives, heading up different objectives, almost on a daily basis. But it was when we stop at nights. I mean, there was always a big risk of getting scudded. Taking incoming. So every night we had to dig in. It was very conventional. You're there digging in, making sure that you got some protection, because we're traveling up there in what we called amphibious assault vehicles, AAVs.
Mm-hmm.
So big metal tins. They're not tanks because they're troop transporters. So we're in there. We're moving up. Hitting up different objectives. But when we get out, for the night, we form our security, and we don't sleep inside the vehicles. We sleep outside the vehicles. So we set in our 360, in actual fighting position, fighting holes. We're actually digging in fighting holes almost anytime we stop, and we go to sleep, we're digging fighting holes. So there's a lot of digging.
So the terrain, was it more like just desert or?
Desert. Almost. It was, there was some areas where we got there, and there's some, green areas. Not much at all. Just deserts. A lot of deserts.
So did y'all encounter a lot of fighting, a lot of
we had a good fair share of firefights. We were out there basically traveling, north to Baghdad, and I mean the first day we were in firefights as soon as we crossed the border. There was a lot of them that they gave up because, I mean, Saddam put the forces that he put on the border weren't the forces that were gonna give us the max resistance. So the ones that weren't really quite treated that well by Saddam, So those guys were happy to see some of them, not all of them, but some of those guys, they were ready to give up. It was sometimes we think back, talking about with some of my buddies, and we're like, man, that was pretty funny. One of the funniest things is to see we're ready to just whoop it on with these guys, right? And we took some fire, as soon as we crossed the border into Iraq. We took some fire, got into a little bit of a firefight, not too heavy, but sometime that day, we crest over a hill, and we see tanks. Our tank unit have his main gun. I mean, it must have been like on 50 Iraqis, and I mean they're crouching down, and they got their hands on top of their head, And I think it's funny. I call me sick or whatever, but I thought it was pretty funny to see the main gun of an Abram, and this Marine just like probably wishing they made a move.
Yeah.
but we crest over the hill and we see like about 50 to 100 Iraqis, just being held by the main gun of an Abram. I thought it was funny.
That would be pretty cool. Well, coming from LA, you talked about the gangs and you were used to the shooting, but what was it really like the first time y'all got into it?
Man, it's not LA.
It's
not LA. It's we trained, and especially in the Marine Corps. I mean, I like to say that we're the best trained, for that type of situation. But nothing prepares you.
Right.
Nothing prepares you for that first firefight, and the pucker factor. Yeah, it's real. It's real. I mean, we were so we found ourselves using, because it was very conventional. I mean, we were traveling down the road. When we crossed the border, it was not a road, but we're in the desert, and all of a sudden we're taking fire, and my platoon didn't take fire immediately. It was the guys that were to our left. They started taking fires, and they just started lighting them up, and it's that's when you're like, holy smokes. I'm like, it's real. It's really happening. This is it's going down, and you get a rush. It just that for me it was like, man, you're ready for it, but you just don't know what you're gonna expect. What's gonna happen, and so I don't know if it kind of worked out that first day that we were on that first firefight. It wasn't us directly getting engaged. We saw our boys, to our right getting engaged, and they took care of business. Kind of, got rid of the butterflies. But it almost got us ready for what's coming up next, because everything that happened after that, it was us traveling towards Baghdad and encountering sometimes light resistance, sometimes heavy resistance, sometimes taking over full compounds, with Fedayeen, some of the best trained dudes that Saddam had, and it was at times you just taking pop shots, you going down the road, you're taking pop shots, and we have to react sometimes, just
right.
And it was it was almost like it worked upwards. The amount of firefights, the amount of resistance that we took, in South Iraq, in our on our way to Baghdad. The closer we got, the more
I
resistance.
was curious about that. How did it increase? I mean, as obviously, how far were you when you started out of Kuwait to Baghdad, do you think?
Shoot, I don't remember that exact distance, but it took us days. It took us days, before we got, days and weeks, before we got to Baghdad. Then we bypassed a lot of areas, that on our way there,
Right.
and sporadic gunfire here and there, some firefights in different areas. Like I said, the troops that he had placed down at the border, I mean, those guys didn't want nothing. A lot of those guys didn't want nothing with us. They just wanted to give up. They were so
Right.
they were so mistreated, by Saddam that when they saw us, they're like, forget that. The way that dude's treating us, or like, there's no point in fighting for him. So I guess that kind of worked out for us. But the closer we got to Baghdad, the more the firefights, we got into, and there was a there was some pretty freaking bad days out there. There was we took some casualties along the way, and then in Baghdad in April we had a really bad day.
That's when you actually got into Baghdad.
Yeah. April 11th. We got that was, as far as my deployment in Iraq, that was the worst day. That was we had a lot of firefights before that, but that day we were we got a bad ambush. We got a bad ambush. It was a night patrol. We had set in an area, established a not a fortified position, but we secured an area for the battalion, and our company got assigned a certain area, and from there we were to patrol, that area. Anywhere we go, we're gonna establish an area, and then we're gonna make sure that they see that we're there, we're active, and we're taking care of that area. We want to almost like flushing out, anything that anybody that wants anything to do with us, and so we established our area, our company area. Puts security in place and everything, and then from there, our platoon, every platoon got it's a different schedule for patrolling the area, and at night that's when we were due to go out on a platoon patrol of the area, and because of the nights prior to that, we had been doing mechanized patrols, in our vehicles. They were expecting that. The enemy was expecting that, so they were ready. They were ready for a big firefight, that day. But that day we actually ended up sending a foot patrol. So we sent out a foot patrol, and they were waiting for us. They got into a complex. They got us in a complex ambush, and it was a mess. We ended up losing 2 of our Marines that day.
Oh my!
Yeah, that was the worst day of that deployment. We ended up losing our platoon sergeant, and my automatic machine gunner.
It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, haven't talked about that enough in a while. Yeah. But it's we gotta talk about them, because that's we gotta make sure that they don't get we don't forget them.
Right.
They're never forgotten. Which is one of the reasons why my youngest son, David was named after David Owens, my saw gunner. He's the one that carried my automatic machine gunner, squad automatic weapon.
Yeah.
He was the most badass dude. And shoot, all of us are prone to that happening to any of us while we're out there. Um,
I
but
don't think people totally understand, and we see it in movies. You know that there's this camaraderie, and we talk about it a lot. But man, those are your brothers, and you guys rely on each other. And I've heard this told that when you're in boot camp, you're basically told forget who all your other friends were. The guy on your left and the guy on your right. That's your friends, and they're going to take care of each other. But when you lose somebody that close, and war's brutal, but it's how do you go on honoring them? I mean, you named your son after him, obviously, and that's a huge honor. But how do we honor those people? I mean, it's I don't think the general public pays attention. I mean, yeah, we hear about the loss of death, and you know, each community has dealt with it when they come home. You know, but we lose people, quote, fighting for our freedoms. I mean, and everybody said, you know, we'd rather take them on there than here. But and it's obvious that that's an emotional point in time for you. When you're there, I mean, when that was all going on, did you think this was it? Did you?
So many times. Yeah, it just, and I mean, I'll go as far as saying none of us want to pay the ultimate sacrifice.
Right.
But almost every single one of us is ready for it. You know, ready to pay that ultimate sacrifice. You know, to cash in that check.
Well, I'm guessing that night brought a whole different reality to your life.
Yes, that was. You know, it was man. For a while after I got back, and after we got back in 2003, I was I if anything, I think that's when I was probably in the darkest place. You know, and I consider myself, you know, pretty strong-willed. You know, it just, you know, headstrong. I would say, you know, just ready for everything. You know, being able to do anything and encounter anything, and but I was in a bad place. I came back in 2003. Man, shoot, I don't think there was at the beginning. I don't think there was a day that I didn't drink. Yeah, I mean, I was making bad decisions left and right, and and not very many people had seen combat at that time. Not very many, so it was almost it was not a lot of people knew how to deal with, you know, and yeah, I hate the stigma of PTSD. It's there, and
Right.
and you know, I know that, I mean, and it's been called different things, you know, throughout history.
Yeah.
Throughout
Yeah.
history, now we call it PTSD, or now it's PTS. You know, whatever. You know, but whatever it was, you know, is now being called whatever it is. You know, but none of us want to. I guess I shouldn't say none of us. A lot of us don't want to admit, you know, that it's there. And I was there in 2003. In 2003, that was me. I didn't want to admit